a lot about who we are, where we came from, and hopefully where we're going.
How does the Pennsylvania Humanities Council promote the humanities?
Through programming, we have some absolutely wonderful programs that are far-reaching across the entire state. I'd love to tell you just a little bit about them. One of my personal favorites are the Commonwealth speakers, who really visit every county in Pennsylvania, telling stories, small performances. Another absolute favorite is Read All About It, and this is through the library system. It encourages not only reading, but discussing what you've read. Another great program that we offer is a grants program. We offer grants to local organizations to support their programs and also to assist in bringing our programs into the area.
How often do you have these events?
We are part of partnerships within the community, weekly, monthly, seasonal. It depends. Check our calendar. It's listed at www.pahumanities.org on the web. I'm sure you'll find something you like.
Thank you so much, Ann and Brian. You know, the humanities really are the key to unlocking what we're most passionate about, like our cultural identity. Let's go back now for more from John Sanchez.
Thanks, Tracy. Let me, you know, I've told you that one of the things that I do at Penn State is I ask questions, I do research. And I started thinking about things, about how people perceive American Indians, especially, well, frankly, what did you think of me, you know, when you first met me? Sometimes people, when they first meet me, they see a big guy and they think that maybe I'm a truck driver, or maybe I'm, you know, that maybe I'm a construction worker. And those are all great jobs, but when I tell them that I'm a professor at Penn State University, they can't believe it. You know, I thought you said you were native. Well, I am. You know, but why couldn't I be? I started thinking about things. I like to get to the bottom of things. I think you can tell that, Charmaine. I get to the bottom of things. And so I began to think, what are the two most common ways of knowing or understanding things in the United States? And the two most ways are schools. I mean, everybody in this room has been to school. We've all had teachers. That's our commonality. The second thing is television. Well, okay, I'm picking on television. These guys are going to make me look ugly in a minute. But I pick on television because it's in everybody's room. You know what I mean? We have 4 of them in our house. 200 million people will turn on their television sets in the United States tonight, still. So there's 2 major ways of knowing, 2 major ways of learning. Now, as I said, I deal with media. And so I began to wonder, there's 2 general areas of media. One is general entertainment. I mean, come on, Dances with Wolves, that's not real. Star Wars, although some of you might think it's real, it wasn't real. Avatar, that's not real. But if we turn on the television tonight and we see the news, and the news says that BP was not able to plug that oil hole, we believe it. Or if they say that they were able to, we believe it. And we believe it because it's the news, and the news is supposed to be the truth. So I began to do a study. That's what I do at Penn State. And I began by doing a study of 10 years of American Indian news reports from the big 3 television, broadcast, evening news programs. I'm not saying they're the ones that are watched anymore the most, but they used to be. And you don't need to have cable or a dish or anything else to get them anymore because it's still free television. So access is probably more than if you had to have cable. So I used CBS, ABC, and NBC in this study. Now, what this study does is that it identifies for the first time, it identifies and examines American Indian news reports and broadcast by the big 3 between the years 1990 and 1999. Now, I purposely used that last decade of the last century on purpose to see how we're coming into the 21st century. Do you see what I mean? How did we end the 20th century? Now, the examination of these news reports constructs a news media report frame. Now, and what that means is it shows how the media portrayed American Indian in American Indian imagery. I mean, there's a young man here that said that probably Hollywood stereotypes, Indians with beads and feathers and buckskins, and he was correct. A lot of people think of American Indians, and in order to be American Indian, you have to dress that way or be that way. So again, I wanted to find out why. And as I said, there were two major areas. General mass media, which I really didn't look into because it's not supposed to be real. The cinema, movies like that, the Twilight series, Twilight New Moon, no, it's not real, And so cinema, television, sporting events, comic books, fiction, literature, entertainment, radio, internet sites, and popular music, I didn't look at because that's entertainment. It's not supposed to be real. But I did look at news reports because news reports are supposed to be the truth. Now, I used a framing study. Now, what a framing study does is it looks at the images or the news reports that are there, and then much like people used to sort mail back in the old day, they'd put one here and one here and one here depending on your address. And that's exactly what I did with these news reports. If I saw a news report on 18th century that had 18th century images in it, I put it up here. If I saw one that I thought that had demeaning or offensive imagery on it, I would put it over here. Now, the other 5 frames that I looked at were like tragic representations of American Indians, casino Indians, positive human interest stories about American Indians, positive or negative interest stories in a 20th century setting. Now, that's important. A 20th century setting, not an 18th century setting. And then finally, those not covered in the previous frames. You always find miscellaneous things you're not really sure where to put in, where to put them into. And I did, just like you would sort the mail. I put them all in there, and then I counted them. Now, I did have a graduate student in the College of Education who had no training on American Indian cultures look at my results to see if they were accurate or not. And the level of agreement was 82%. So I think that probably the results would be valid. Research question number 1. What is the actual number of American Indian Native American news reports by the Big Three broadcast in this 10-year period? And research question number 2 was, what is the most common way that these Big Three networks frame coverage of American Indians during that study period? So 1, how many are there? And number 2, what were the images? My method of study was this. I went to the Vanderbilt Television Archives, and they have every news report, I think they started in the 60s, from the Big Three networks, and now more. But in the ones that I was looking for were from the Big Three. Now, you start off by doing a computer search, and I only used a few words. I used Native American, American Indian, Native, Indigenous, or tribe. And generally, like if we're talking about the Navajo Nation, we'll say Navajo tribe. So many people don't realize that we are nations. And it makes a difference. When you think about the word tribe, you might think about a person who's dressed in a breechcloth, carrying a bow and arrow or whatever. That's a tribe. But a nation, what do you think about? What are the results? The first one was how many news reports are there? Well, I counted all 3 networks' news reports, and the number came to 175,889 total number of news reports by the Big Three in that 10-year period. Now, that's a lot. But how many of those were on American Indians? Only 98. Only 98 news reports combined by the big three were on American Indians. NBC had the most with 46. ABC had second with 37. And then CBS, arguably the most liberal network, which you would think would cover probably the most about diversity, had only 15 in a 10-year period. Question number 2 then, what is the most common way that ABC, CBS, and NBC evening news programs then frame coverage of American Indians? So what are the images that we're seeing in these 98 news reports? Well, number 1 was frame number 1. Representations of American Indians with 18th century images. Let me just go through this first, then we'll talk about them. The second is positive or negative representations of American Indians in 20th century settings, which means like there could be a building, or it's in a school, or it's at the university, or something like that. The third most commonly used frame is tragic representations of American Indians. The next most commonly used frame were media representations of American Indians not covered in the previous 6. So it was the miscellaneous one, that didn't fit in anywhere. The fifth most commonly used frame were representations of casino Indians. And casino Indians were still kind of new in the last decade of the 20th century. And the sixth most commonly used frame were demeaning or offensive representations of American Indians with labels, such as the Braves, Squaws, Chiefs, Redskins, etc. And the least most commonly used frame was frame number 5, representations of American Indians in positive human interest stories. Now, I'll start my comments with that one. Think about it. How good would it be for our people to see positive news stories about our people? Are there news stories out there like that? Well, this is a picture of President Clinton speaking at Ogallala to the Lakota Nation. But not many people knew about it. Did my children? My children could not wait to get home and watch the news. Usually they just pick up the sports page, But they couldn't wait to get home and sit down and watch the news. And they were so proud of what they saw. Is there other news? Does anybody happen to know who this guy is? Well, obviously he's an astronaut. His name is John Harrington. He's an American Indian enrolled in the Chickasaw Nation. Now, how come Native children don't know who he is? Or maybe they do know, but how come you don't know? Still, even in this frame, the images most prevalent in these frames contain images of American Indians in 18th century beads and feathers. Now, that is the presidential seal of the United States of America. And the person standing behind that is Ben Nighthorse Kemble. He is an American Indian, and he was a United States Senator. And I have to admit, most of the pictures that I see of Ben are like this one. Does this have an impact on people? It really, really does. For example, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Remember when I asked that question? I love doing that. What's the first thing that comes to mind when you think about a contemporary Native American or American Indian family? I think of my own family. But I'm thinking of this family today. This is a Navajo family. They're called the Dene. That's not their last name. That's